What if Africa isn't poor because it failed to develop, but because someone else systematically blocked that development? In 1972, the Guyanese historian Walter Rodney published a book with a brutal title, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. In it, he accused European powers of using slavery, colonial rule, and unequal trade not just to enrich themselves, but to actively prevent African societies from growing. According to Rodney, Africa helped to develop Western Europe in the same proportion as Western Europe helped to underdevelop Africa. That is a heavy claim. Is it exaggerated, or is it the uncomfortable truth behind the modern global economy? By the end of this video, you'll not only know what Rodney argued, you'll see how he built his case from centuries of African history and why his book still matters today. To understand Rodney's argument, we have to start with a simple question he asks at the beginning of his book. Who and what is responsible for Africa's underdevelopment? He rejects the idea that underdevelopment is an inherent African problem. Instead, he insists that underdevelopment is a condition produced by history, especially by capitalism and imperialism. Rodney's approach is global. He looks at Africa before Europeans arrived in large numbers, at Europe before its overseas expansion, and then at what happened when those two worlds collided. He examines the Atlantic slave trade, the building of colonial empires, and the structures of trade and investment that linked African economies to European capitals. And at every stage, he asks, did these connections help Africa grow, or did they strip away its wealth and block its potential? Before we follow his timeline, we need to be clear about what he means by development and underdevelopment. For Rodney, development is the ability of a society to use its resources to improve the lives of its people, to build industries, agriculture, education, health, and political institutions in a self-directed way. Underdevelopment is the opposite. It is not just being behind. It is being held back, having your resources drained and your choices limited by someone else's power. This distinction is crucial. Rodney is not describing Africa as simply less developed than Europe. He is arguing that Africa's underdevelopment is the other side of Europe's development. Rodney begins with pre-colonial Africa. He reminds his readers that before the 15th century, African societies were not empty, primitive spaces waiting for civilization. They had their own trajectories of development. In West Africa, empires like Ghana, Mali, and Songhai controlled large territories, collected taxes, and regulated trade in gold and other goods. Cities like Timbuktu were centers of scholarship and commerce. In East Africa, Swahili city-states traded with Arabia, India, and beyond, exporting ivory, gold, and other products. Southern Africa had complex societies with cattle economies, ironworking, and later stone cities such as Great Zimbabwe. These examples matter because they show that Africa had political organization, long-distance trade, technology, and social systems that could have evolved in many directions. From the 15th century onward, European ships begin to appear regularly along African coasts. At first, trade involves goods like cloth, beads, and metal tools exchanged for African gold, ivory, and pepper. But very quickly, another commodity becomes central: human beings. The transatlantic slave trade, what Rodney calls the European slave trade, expands drastically from the 16th to the 19th century. Millions of Africans are captured, sold, and shipped to the Americas to work on plantations growing sugar, cotton, coffee, and other crops. European merchants profit. European banks profit. European industries profit. Rodney's first key argument is that Africa's labor and resources helped to develop Western Europe. African labor, in the form of enslaved people, created enormous wealth in European-controlled plantations and mines. African raw materials fed European factories and trade networks. But what was happening inside Africa at the same time? This is where Rodney introduces his second key mechanism. While Africa was helping Europe to develop, Europe was underdeveloping Africa. He points to several effects of the slave trade. First, depopulation. Entire regions lost significant portions of their working-age population, especially men. Second, militarization. The demand for captives encouraged warfare and raids, destabilizing societies and shifting energy away from productive activity. Third, economic distortion. Instead of investing in local industries, many African leaders became dependent on trading people for European goods. And fourth, political restructuring. The trade created new power centers and weakened others, often rewarding those who collaborated with European interests. Taken together, Rodney argues, these effects blocked Africa's independent development. The wealth created by African labor did not stay in Africa. It was grabbed by the capitalist countries of Europe, while restrictions were placed on Africa's capacity to use its own economic potential. That is how he says underdevelopment was produced during the slave trade era. The story intensifies in the 19th century. As the slave trade declines, European powers shift to a new phase, direct colonization. This is the period often called the Scramble for Africa. Britain, France, Belgium, Germany, Portugal, and others carve up the continent into colonies. Rodney sees colonialism as the continuation and deepening of underdevelopment. Under colonial rule, African economies are reorganized around the needs of European industry. Colonial governments and companies identify minerals like copper, gold, and diamonds, agricultural products like cocoa, coffee, rubber, and cotton, and then build systems to extract them as cheaply as possible. African farmers are pushed into growing cash crops for export rather than diverse food crops for local consumption. African miners and workers are paid low wages and kept in poor conditions. Infrastructure like railways and ports are built, but their main purpose is to move resources from the interior to the coast and then overseas. They do not connect African regions to each other in ways that would support internal development. European companies and colonial states control prices, taxes, and investment. Profits flow outward. Rodney emphasizes that this is not just exploitation through trade. It is exploitation through investment as well. European capital comes in to build mines, plantations, and transport networks, but ownership and control remain external. Again, Africa's resources and labor help Europe grow. Again, restrictions are placed on Africa's own capacity to build independent industries. Colonial law often forbids Africans from competing with European firms. Education is limited, focused on producing clerks and low-level workers rather than scientists, engineers, or policymakers. Political participation is curtailed. In Rodney's view, colonialism creates a structure of dependency. African territories become peripheries whose primary function is to supply raw materials and cheap labor to European metropoles. He sums up his thesis this way. Throughout the period that Africa has participated in the capitalist world economy, two factors have brought about underdevelopment. First, the wealth created by African labor and from African resources is taken by the capitalist countries at the center. Second, restrictions are placed on African capacity to make maximum use of its economic potential, which is what development is all about. But Rodney does not stop at blaming Europe. He also asks what role African leaders and classes played inside this system. He argues that certain African elites, chiefs, merchants, later local bourgeoisie, benefited from trade and colonial rule and helped maintain structures of underdevelopment, even as the majority suffered. Underdevelopment, in his view, is produced both by external imperialism and by internal class relations. By the mid-20th century, African nations begin to win formal independence. European flags come down. New African flags rise. But Rodney warns that the legacy of underdevelopment does not disappear with constitutional change. Colonial borders remain, often cutting across ethnic and historical lines. Economies are still structured around export of a few primary commodities. International trade and investment are still dominated by powerful nations and corporations. Debt, unequal terms of trade, and technological dependence keep many African countries in vulnerable positions. Rodney writes that genuine development would require a radical break from the international capitalist system as it currently operates. He envisions a path where African societies prioritize internal needs, build industries under popular control, and reshape their relationship with global markets. His book is therefore not just a history. It is a political intervention. He wrote it in a context of anti-colonial struggle and socialist movements, hoping to give activists a clear analysis of how exploitation worked. Of course, not everyone agrees with Rodney on every point. Some scholars argue that he underestimates internal African factors, such as wars or ecological challenges, that existed independently of European contact. Others question whether all regions experienced underdevelopment in the same way. More recent historians have refined, critiqued, or extended his framework. Yet even many critics acknowledge the power of his central insight. Underdevelopment is not a natural starting point. It is a condition created through historical processes of domination, extraction, and blocked potential. For Rodney, understanding those processes is necessary if we want to change them. So, how did Europe underdevelop Africa, in Walter Rodney's view? Through centuries of slavery that drained people and destabilized societies. Through colonial rule that reorganized economies around Europe's needs. Through trade and investment systems that pulled wealth outward while limiting what Africans could build for themselves. And through structures of dependency that survived even after independence. You do not have to agree with every detail of Rodney's analysis to see why his book became a classic of African history and political thought. It forces us to ask hard questions about how the world economy was built, who paid the price, and why certain regions remain trapped in patterns set long ago. If this story has helped you see African history and global power from a different angle, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll continue exploring the empires, thinkers, revolutions, and ideas that shaped Africa's past and still shape its future. And if you've read How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, tell me in the comments, which part of Rodney's argument do you find most convincing, and which part do you think needs updating today? If you did enjoy this, then hit the like button, subscribe, comment, share, and follow for more African stories like this.